All right, friends, welcome back to another episode of Mind Games on the Sellout Crowd Network. Very glad you're with me this week. I'm Guerin Emig, columnist for Sellout Crowd at selloutcrowd.com. Catch my work and that of my colleagues at selloutcrowd.com. Writing a lot about college football, even with the end of the season. Starting to hit college basketball a little bit, always hitting the Thunder hard with John Hamm and Brett Dawson. And today, a little bit of NFL chit chat. We want to take advantage of playoff fever that's gripping the country and certainly Oklahoma by proxy. We've got a special guest lined up for that, a little Buffalo Bills talk with Jerry Ostroski, friend of mine from Tulsa, former Bills player who's got some things I'm sure to say about the Bills exit against the latest exit against the Chiefs. First, want to thank our sponsors, Sellout Crowd. They do a great job with not just this show, but others and other content. Attaching their business to our work is something we do not take for granted here on the network. For the sake of Mind Games, they include Two Fellas Movers, the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum, MidFirst Bank, Next Gen Roofing, FireLakeJobs.com, 988 Oklahoma's Mental Health Lifeline, and Oklahoma Ford Dealers. Drive into your best in Oklahoma Ford Dealers today for the latest deals and the best deals on Ford's full lineup of trucks and SUVs. Okay, Jerry, last time I ran you down was for a Tulsa World column on heartbreak in Buffalo, unfortunately. I guess there's no other kind. 2 years ago, they lost in Arrowhead to the Chiefs and Pat Mahomes in excruciating fashion. You were terrific then. I feel sort of guilty enlisting your help now that once again Buffalo has bowed out of the AFC postseason at the hands of Mahomes and the Chiefs. Where do you want to start? Is it hurt as much now as it ever did? Guy who literally invested some years of football with the Bills and has become a fan of the organization since your departure? Or are you getting so used to this that you're numb to it?
Well, I wouldn't say I'm numb. I feel for the fan base.
Yeah.
Unless you have been a part of the Bills Mafia, I don't think people really understand the amount of passion that fan base in that city has for their football team. And the storied past of the franchise, we understand the four heartbreaks of the Super Bowls and, wide right. And then we have another situation this weekend where the same thing happens. It is a good punchline for a lot of jokes, unfortunately, but this is a passionate fan base that I just truly believe in. Growing up in Philadelphia and dealing with the heartbreak of Super Bowl losses and close losses there, and eventually in 2018 they come through and finally win a Super Bowl. I'd have to think that at some point it's going to happen in Buffalo. They're going to win their championship, and unfortunately this year it did not happen. Obviously they lose 27-24 to the Chiefs, but if you look at where the Bills were this season and where they've gotten to, it's hard to not talk about just the resilience and the overall success that this season was for the Bills, considering where they were and the situation at hand just to get to the playoffs. So resilient group, just like the city that they're in. And I'm disappointed, but I'm not heartbroken. As Bills fans say, we always got next season.
All right, so before we go any further, Jerry, I suppose the thing to do would be to give listeners, viewers, an idea of just how attached you are to that organization. I mean, I could call Buffalo and talk to a columnist from the news. I could find someone connected to a website that does a lot of Bills content. You lived and breathed Bills football at then Rich Stadium. It surely wasn't Highmark at the time, right? And we're on the field during the Music City Miracle. You know a lot of the players. You've sweat and bled with a lot of the players from that Super Bowl era with Jim Kelly and Bruce Smith and those guys. So this is real to you, and I think it's helpful for again our audience to understand that.
My first year in Buffalo was the last Super Bowl year. I was on the practice squad, and I got to experience that Super Bowl in Atlanta against the Cowboys. Yeah. And, after that was up there for 10 years as a player. And it's a city that's very, very close to myself and my family. I still go up there, try to go once a year, see friends, go to a game. We got to go to a Sabres game this year and a Bills game for that New England game, the last home game of the season. But it's a tremendous community. I mean, being on that airplane, it's crazy. I mean, the feeling it was a surreal feeling sitting on that airplane after the fourth straight Super Bowl loss and seeing the look on the guys' faces like Jim Kelly's and Thurman Thomas's, Bruce Smith, Andre Reed, Cornelius Bennett, Darryl Talley. I'm like, and it was just a look of almost like bewilderment or confusion, like they couldn't believe that it once again it happened. But it just shows you that team and kind of how they are. And I don't know if you got a chance to see the four the 30 for 30 special on that four Super Bowl run, but it summed it up pretty well. I mean, that team kind of exemplifies the city of Buffalo. It's a small community. I mean, there's not a lot of people in it. I mean, it's about 700,000 young professional, young people that go to college. They don't come back. They go somewhere else to work usually. And it's a dying industrial town.
Yeah.
And those people, it's a small community. You live in it. You intertwine with the community. You know people very, very well. I mean, their houses are always open for you. And the Bills football teams kind of emulate the town that they're in. I mean, the Buffalo people are a lot like the team. They're resilient. They're hard-nosed. They're tough people. They're hard-working, blue-collar people. And it's just a really, really special relationship between that franchise and the city of Buffalo. It was a really, really awesome experience to be able to live there for 10 years and be a part of it.
Yeah, it's interesting. People see, the mafia in the parking lot, right? With diving into the tables. They see the guys with the oversized buffalo wings on their heads, their version of the cheese heads in the stands. Right. They see the folks, stripped down to their skivvies, even though it's, minus 20 out. And it is easy to make that sort of a mark around the league. Besides the Super Bowl failures of the area that you just referenced, Jerry. Well, that's to look at this. I think that's to be short-sighted, right? That's
right.
To not see the connection, and that's what you're speaking to here.
Right, exactly. I mean, that's what I don't. Unless you live in Buffalo and you understand what it's like to remove 3 to 4 foot of snow from your driveway, go inside, and 4 hours later go out and do it again and again and again. It's the same thing. It's very, very similar. These past couple games in Buffalo, they've had huge snowstorms. And back in the day when I was there, it was $10 an hour. Now they bumped it to $20 an hour. But just to see the shovel brigade show up and the people in the town willing to work to get that stadium prepared, I don't think people understand. That's a pride thing just as much as, people need money. They need extra money, but it's a pride thing. They want that stadium to be perfect for when the opponent comes in and the opponent's fans come in and that everybody can live that experience. I mean, it's really special.
Put your football hat on for just a second. Analyze what's going on. What do you do? And moving forward with Josh Allen, what do you do with Stephon Diggs? What do you do right. With McDermott? How far off do we react based on the latest setback, just from potential changes, and let's just stay the course and hope that it breaks our way eventually.
The previous answer, I talk about the passion of the people. Obviously, they get sometimes maybe over passionate, and the guy, and rightfully so, the guy that has the crosshairs on him right now is the head coach, and there's a lot of people that feel. McDermott's kind of jumped the shark, to give a Happy Days reference. And this is as far as they're going to go. Maybe get to an AFC Championship game, but never get to that Super Bowl. And I don't agree with that. I think Sean McDermott's a tremendous coach. I think his personality, his temperament is perfect for the city of Buffalo. And I just look back at the last 17 years before this playoff run and all the different coaches we had that came in and left. And I think Sean's perfect. I mean, Sean is a tough, hard-nosed guy. I mean, a lot of people don't understand this, Guerin. I don't know if you know this, but he went to William & Mary. He played defensive back, and one of his defensive back teammates, do you know who this is? Mike Tomlin. Him and Mike Tomlin played college football together at William & Mary.
Oh, that is a steal.
They were both defensive backs. He's a lot like Mike. I think what solidified it to me was watching last season. You can say what you will about last season, but the Damar Hamlin situation was just something that nobody's ever dealt with before in the NFL. And to see how he handled that and how he got his team rallied and prepared as well as he could to play after that just tragic,
Mm.
experience and situation solidified it to me. I mean, he's a good man, and it's hard nowadays to find good head coaches that are also good men. And he's a good man. I think he's perfect for the city. As far as the team goes, I think they do have some holes in their roster. I think it's obviously you got a top 3 quarterback in the world. I mean, Josh Allen does things physically that I've never seen another quarterback do.
Mm-hmm.
Is Patrick Mahomes a better quarterback? Yes, I believe that is so. I think this guy's been to six straight AFC championship games. I mean, obviously the guy can play, and I think that's what happened this weekend. If you want to look at it, between injuries at linebacker and defensive back that decimated that Bills defense, they got Mahomes. There's no other way to look at it. I mean, the guy's tremendous, but you got Josh Allen. He's still young. You got a great head coach that understands defense. They'll fill those holes at linebacker. They got guys coming back from injury. Milano's the main piece in that. Bernard, the former Baylor Bear, he did just an unbelievable job of filling in that role for Terrell Edmonds when he left in free agency. So they've got the pieces. There is a few things they're going to need to look at. Maybe another cornerback. They're old at safety with Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, 2 just tremendous players, but they are over 30, and it's starting to take its wear and tear on them. But they've got to find a receiver that can stretch the field. Diggs, while he can do that some, is really more of a across the middle type guy, a route running type guy, not really your home run hitter. They got to find a guy at receiver that can get downfield for explosive plays. They addressed the tight end role, wonderfully in the draft this year with Dalton Kincaid, who's probably could be rookie of the year in the league. I mean, he's had a tremendous season. Offensive line solidified. Running back is good with Cooks. So when you look at this team, some linebackers, some safeties, but really they got to get some weapons at receiver to try to stretch that field. But Guerin, I say all this with the fact that knowing right now as we sit here and speak, they're $29 million over the salary cap. So they're going to have to spend every dollar wisely, which they will. But it will be tough to really just go out and shop because they're going to be a little bit cash strapped this season.
Well, if you began with McDermott, then someone were to come to you and say you could have Belichick tomorrow if it meant a McDermott resignation. It would open the door for a guy who'd actually like to try to build what he did at New England and Buffalo. You'd say no thanks. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, I would. I would say no thanks. I mean, because he's going to have to blow the roster up and redo it. I don't think people understand it takes a special type of player to play for a Bill Belichick. And I'm not saying there's not guys on that roster that can, but I just think that the roster that's built, it's kind of the guys are kind of fraternity-like. I mean, they have fun. I mean, you can watch them every week. Deion Dawkins is leading some kind of dance party in the locker room. Josh Allen's a lighthearted guy. So it's going to take, if you bring in a Bill Belichick, it's going to take you getting rid of some guys because some of those dudes aren't going to respond to that type of coaching. So it would be a little bit different, I think, than it is now. And I'm not saying McDermott's easy. I'm just saying it's a little, his style's different than Bill's.
Gotcha. Those with the team out of the playoffs, either who didn't make it or got knocked out, in my case, it was the Steelers get knocked out by your Bills, gravitate to organizations like Buffalo, Jerry, for some of the reasons you laid out earlier in the show. Again, the pull of the organization, the connection between fan base and team, personalities, that kind of thing. Seems to me that of the 4 who are remaining, the 4 championship teams, Detroit fills that role now. Is that a correct read to you, or are you getting behind someone else?
No, I think you're 100% correct. I don't know if you got to see that promo when they did the whole 8 Mile skit and they had Jared Goff driving the car as opposed to Marshall. That was awesome to me. I mean, and I think the thing that Detroit has done, and I think the thing that Detroit has done better than anybody in the NFL is they've embraced who they want to be, and they don't reach for players because they're good or whatever. They go get players that fit what they want to do. And, Dan Campbell, and even the hiring of Dan Campbell, right? I mean, anymore nowadays, it's if I'm going to hire a head coach, it has to be one of 2 things, a prior head coach or a coordinator, right? Well, Dan Campbell was neither one of those things. He was a position coach in the NFL.
Yeah.
and they saw him as a guy that fit what they wanted, fit the city, and brought him in. They got Chris Spielman back in the fold, and they got him as an advisor. And by the way, I did an interview with his brother not too long ago, former GM of the Vikings, and the Malcolm Rodriguez pick in Detroit had Spielman written all over it. If there was ever a guy that reminded me of Chris Spielman, it would be Malcolm Rodriguez. But going back to that franchise, I just think they've done a wonderful job of filling players that fit the roles that they want. And that's the team I'm pulling for. As much as I love Baltimore, and I've always been a Baltimore fan, I love Lamar Jackson. I think I love his story too, because this is a guy that not too long ago had general managers openly jumping ahead to tell people we are not interested in him.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole contract negotiation and how long it took for Baltimore to sign him, and now he's got him in an AFC Championship game along with a tremendous defense. But yeah, I mean, you have to get behind Detroit, right? I mean, it's just an awesome story.
If 90% of the neutrals will pull for them to beat San Francisco to upset the Niners, will they? That becomes another question. What do you think? Do they have a shot?
I think they have a shot because the way they play, they're not going to make mistakes. They're not going to beat themselves. They're going to stop the run. They're going to try to establish a run. And the thing that they do well that I think a lot of teams have a hard time with San Francisco is, Shanahan, it starts with the way they walk out on the field. The guy's carrying a huge boom box, and the first guy out there, is your left tackle, and who, by the way, probably could arguably be the best left tackle that's ever played. But, this is a team that likes to bully people. They like to intimidate people, a lot like Baltimore does. And I don't think you're going to do that with Detroit. And I think the matchup fits. I think it really does. And this might only be a 14-9 game, but it's going to be a good one if you like physical football.
You referenced Jackson over in the AFC. Does this feel now comfortably like his breakthrough about to happen? Or does he still have to beat – obviously he's going to have to beat Mahomes to get to the ultimate game, but
right.
Does he need that to have fully if there's something left for him to break through, is this it? I mean, does he need another 2 postseason games for that to occur?
I think, unfortunately for Lamar, he's a lot like Josh Allen. Until they win it all, they're going to continually be, I don't want to say ridiculed, but criticized for not winning the big game or not winning the championship. Unfortunately for Lamar, I think no matter what he does, that's what his legacy will be built upon or be judged by, whether he wins a championship or not. So, yeah, I do believe that. I think that as good as he is and the numbers he's put up, and I think arguably – I don't even want to say arguably. I mean, I think he's going to be your MVP of the league. He still is going to have to win that championship to get people off of his back.
Mm-hmm. And there's a certain fair versus unfair, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's just like a lot of people are criticizing Josh Allen for the loss on Sunday, and if you're blaming Josh Allen for that loss, then you didn't watch the game. It's that simple. You can say what you want. To me, that game was lost on defense. Obviously, they were in shambles. They had a practice squad player starting a middle linebacker. Rasul Douglas was playing on one leg at corner. But the inability of the Bills' defense to stop Pacheco in the running game of the Chiefs was the number one factor in why that team lost. I mean, Patrick Mahomes only threw the ball 23 times. So that should tell you all you need to know.
How worried should the Ravens be about Kansas City? I thought they were – man, I thought a couple of weeks ago, I thought this is it. I mean, they did not look like – I mean, they just looked out of sorts, right? I mean, they weren't moving the ball. They weren't things were off on the sidelines. There was it felt like some animus between players. That wasn't the Chiefs the last few years that I recognized, and for them to have turned it around as quickly as they have is a little bit stunning, and therefore perhaps worrisome for the Ravens. Or is Baltimore playing well enough that it shouldn't matter?
Well, one thing about the Chiefs that they've done all season long, Spagnuolo's had that defense playing at a high level. Chris Jones has played tremendously well. They also have a very physical defense. So defensive-wise, they've been playing good and kept the Chiefs around. Offensively, obviously, no matter how good your quarterback is, if you don't have weapons at receiver, it doesn't matter. And they've had some growing pains at receiver. They've had drops at receiver. Rice recently's kind of broke through a little bit and been a guy you can go to. And obviously Travis Kelce being, on the north side of 30, a guy that, perennially is the best tight end in the league. He had an injury early in the season. He, I think now is finally showing that he's healthy. He had a great game this past weekend. But, until somebody beats Mahomes, how do you not pick the Chiefs, right? It will be a tall task for him this weekend. I think Baltimore's defense is wonderful. I think they will be able to stop the run, and that's going to put more onus on those receivers, Kelce and Mahomes, to try to make plays downfield. It'll be a lot tougher for him this weekend than it was last.
Okay, fair enough. You got time for some exit questions? A little lighter
Yeah,
side?
I've got whatever you need, man. I've got time today.
What's the coldest you ever wore in Buffalo all those years?
First season in Buffalo, we talked about it earlier. I was on the practice squad. We played the Raiders in the divisional round, and the temperature of the game, we were at 0 to kick, and the wind chill was minus 32 degrees. It is still the coldest game in the history of the NFL, and it was to see Howie Long wear sleeves. Howie Long never wore sleeves, and the toughest guy I knew at the time, a Villanova grad, a dude that I watched and loved, was wearing sleeves. I was like on the sideline in shock, like, I can't believe this is happening. That was the coldest game I was ever in. And then the next week we played Joe Montana and the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game. And that was the game that Bruce Smith pretty much ended Montana's career, hit him on a blindside sack.
Yeah, I remember that.
Head off the cold turf, and the rest is history. But that game was not as cold as the week before, but it was close. So, we've been some cold ones.
Did you go put sleeves on after you saw Long?
I was on the practice squad, Guerin, so I was in a coat and 18 layers, man. I didn't have to wear a uniform, but I'll tell you.
I didn't know solidarity, right?
I never wore sleeves, though. I never wore sleeves when I played, and my son never wears sleeves. When I coached the offensive line at Holland Hall for about 15 years, those guys never wore sleeves. They knew how I felt about sleeves. And what's funny is, if you remember, and this is a good story for this, Oklahoma, right. Thurman was in the Buffalo for his whole career. And his last season, he went to Miami and played for the Dolphins as a free agent. Pat Jones is actually the tight ends coach down there. Talked Thurman into coming down. One of the reasons they brought Thurman in was to kind of be a mentor to some of these younger guys, kind of create some toughness amongst them and show them what it takes to be a champion. And they were getting ready to play in Buffalo. And Thurman told all of them, he goes, "You're not wearing sleeves," because Thurman never wore sleeves. And he's like, "You're not wearing sleeves." He goes, "You guys come out." He goes, "All we do is sit on the sidelines and just laugh at you. You got hoodies on. You got like 3 different shirts on." He's like, "We're not wearing sleeves." And they did. They came out, and 90% of them didn't have sleeves on.
Right.
So, it's just a mental thing. But if you're in it long enough and you have your routine, it's pretty easy to stay. You're never warm, okay? When you play, you're never warm, but you got a big sideline coat, you got a knit hat, and you got the heated bench. The heated bench makes everything possible. If you did not have the heated bench, it would be brutal. So as long as you got the heated bench, anything's possible.
All right, so I referenced Buffalo's cold. We got to reference Buffalo's cuisine. What's the most wings, Jerry, you ever ate in one sitting?
I've eaten between 30 and 50 before.
Is that right?
I had some help that created a mass amount of hunger. It was one of those deals where you showed up at the wing joint at 2 a.m, right? But no, we went up there a few weeks ago. We went to a place called 911 Tavern, which it's this little dive hole in the wall bar that is in the bottom of a house. I think the owners live upstairs. They don't take credit cards, only cash. Best wings I've ever had in Buffalo. And they brought a plate out of 30, and they had them stacked up all nice and neat. I didn't hit all 30, but I hit a majority. I definitely hit over 50% of them. That's for sure.
How deep do you get with the sauce, man? Are you like, no, that's not hot enough?
No, I mean, when I was younger, you want to pound your chest and say, you use the hottest wings you can get because that's what you do, right? You're stupid. I like to taste. I like to taste the sauce. I like the wing. I like to taste the wings. I don't want to be hurt by the wings, right? So we go with regular hot. That's more than enough. And I think some of the places up there have a few different things they might put in them to differentiate their style. But a good hot basic buffalo wing, it's hard to beat.
Yeah, I hear you. All right, toughest SOB you ever lined up against playing pro football?
Woo. Toughest dude I ever played against. Well, the hardest guy that I ever played against, for me anyway, was Leon Lett when he was with Dallas.
Okay.
And they called him Big Cat, and they
Mm-hmm.
called him that for a reason because he was so agile and he was so quick. But the thing about me was I have really long arms for my height. I mean, I probably got arm length of a 6'8" guy, and I'm 6'4". And so my arm length and everything was always an advantage to me. Leon's the first dude I ever played against that he had his hands on me before I could get mine on him because his arms were longer than mine were. And it's an unsettling feeling when you're trying to block somebody and their hands are on you, controlling you before you control them. It's tough. So he was the toughest player I played against as far as in the league. Now there's guys out there that are grinders, tough dudes, but just difficulty and just a guy that could flat play, it would be Leon Lett.
That's a kind olive branch, man, because everyone, of course, you say Leon Lett, right? The default is to the Super Bowl moment.
Right.
Like,
Right.
guys.
Well, we're not talking about anything like that. We're just talking about playing ability.
I
right?
know. No, I hear. That was Lett, though, right? They got caught from behind by.
Yes, it was.
Tasker or BB? I always forget who the Bill was who caught him. Was it BB or Tasker?
It was BB.
BB. Okay.
BB was known for his speed. Played at Chandron State in Nebraska, and actually has a speed school up there now. That's where he's from.
Oh yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, BB was the guy who caught him. I mean, crazy fast, overachieving, max effort guy. So it's not a shock that he was the dude that got the ball out.
Gosh. Emporia State, right? Leon Lett, I think.
Yes,
I think
Emporia State is Leon Lett. That is correct. Very good call.
Yeah, Mr. Tomlin. Yeah, I feel ashamed of myself for not picking up on Tomlin and William and Mary earlier in the show. So I redeem myself. You set up like you've got your own thing cooking, Jerry. You got a pod.
Yeah.
Go ahead, everyone.
I enjoyed my radio time. I liked when I had my radio show, and I will eventually probably gravitate back to the radio at some point. I had an opportunity to go back on a few years ago. I just felt it wasn't something I could do with my son playing at Tulsa. Because I'm a firm believer in you have to talk truth. You have to speak what's going on. And I never wanted to say anything about the program or the school to where he would have to answer for what his dad said. So I didn't do radio, but a buddy of mine, a guy that I played with in Buffalo for 7-8 years, John Fina, who was a left tackle, I was talking to him one day on the phone, and he was doing a podcast with this group called Buffalo Rumblings. It's tied to SB Nation. And he said, "Hey, come on the show one time." And I did it. And they're like, "Hey, I was like, "Yeah, I can get around it a little bit. I've done it before." So they asked me to do a show. So they actually paired me up with a girl that I'd never met before in my life, a girl named Sarah Larson, who lives in Fort Lauderdale, who grew up in Buffalo. So we do a show on Wednesday nights at 9:00 called Line to Gain. And we do it on YouTube, and then we podcast it as well. So it's kind of a cool perspective because you got the former player and the football guy and a girl who is now 62 straight games she's been to.
Okay.
And, you get more of that kind of a fan perspective and how a fan, and she knows football, and she's a freaky capologist. So the off season is kind of when she shines because she's really good at the cap and understands all the numbers and, knows the game. But you get that side of it and then my side of it, and it meshes really, really well. So that's what we do. We'll be off this week because I get my knee replaced tomorrow. But hopefully next week I'll be out of my painkiller fog long enough to be able to do the show.
Baby, man. I hope. Tell me you're not doing a surgery a month like the horror stories you hear about the.
No, I'm actually pretty fortunate, Guerin.
Okay,
I've only had a few. I've only had a few things that I've had to deal with. I have had my left knee replaced in 2018. It was really bad. Now I got to get my right knee replaced. I'm pretty bow-legged, so bow-leggedness is good when you're playing because it's kind of built-in knee braces, right? It's kind of hard to get rolled up on the outside when your legs are already bowed out. But when you get done and you stop playing and you retire, it's not necessarily good for cartilage wear. So, yeah, I'm definitely going to have to get my other knee replaced. And other than that, maybe a knee scope to clean up a meniscus. But other than that, I've knock on wood, I've been good. But, I'm on the north side of 50 now and starting to get into all those things as well. So just part of life.
Okay, well, we're going to wish you well with regard to that. We're going to wish you well with regard to your show. We want to thank you for coming on, talking about the Bills and the NFL playoffs. We'll run you down for some college football talk before long. You've been great. You've been helpful to me as long as I've been writing for the Tulsa World. Glad that's still the case now that I'm with Sellout Crowd. Thanks very much for tuning in and watching, listening to the show. We'll be back next week with another episode, perhaps football, perhaps a little hoops now that we tick toward March. Thanks to Jacqueline Musgrove, our tireless producer behind the scenes, for keeping us on the air. Thanks to Michael Lane, our creative director, Michael Martin, all the crew at Sellout Crowd. We put out the work every day. All we ask is that you give us a shot. Check us out either in written form or podcast form. Myself, my colleagues, it's a labor of love. We hope you along for the ride as much as you can. So stay warm, stay safe, and we will talk to you next week.